Imagine walking a dusty path through the Roman countryside, not among senators in fine robes, but alongside the people whose names history rarely bothered to record. These were the farmers, the laborers, the smallholders who rose with the sun, worked the soil with their own hands, and kept the empire alive one harvest at a time. Without them, Rome's marble forums and marching legions would have been nothing more than empty dreams. In this lecture, we'll step into their world, see what they ate, how they worked, where they found joy, and how they endured the hardships of their time. By the end, you might see that their lives were far more complex and far more human than the dusty word peasant suggests. If this journey into the past speaks to you, a quick like or a simple subscription helps us bring more of these stories to light. And if there's a chapter of history you'd like us to explore next, share it in the comments. We do read them, and many of our lectures begin with ideas from curious minds like yours. You imagine waking up before the sun has even risen, the air cool and damp, your breath curling in the pale darkness. You lie still for a moment, hearing the faint rustle of the wind through the trees and the distant bleating of a neighbor's goat. There is no pause between waking and working. Your life is the land, and the land does not wait. You rise because you must. You rise because your family will eat only if you coax food from the soil. Your land is modest, a patch of earth passed down through your family, the same fields your father worked and his father before him. It is your pride, your burden, and your only real wealth. In Rome, land is not just property, it is identity. To own it is to belong. To lose it is to become no one. And you know deep down that loss is never more than one bad harvest away. Every season feels like a wager. You plant with hope, but you plant knowing that drought, flood, or pests could take everything. You watch the sky more than you watch people. A few days of heavy rain can drown your seedlings. Too much sun can burn them before they root. Nature's hand is indifferent to your needs, and you learn early that it will never bend to your will. Still, the state will have its due. Taxes arrive whether the harvest is rich or ruined. The collector does not care if your children are sick or if storms have swept away half your crop. You owe the Republic or the Empire what it demands. If you cannot pay in grain, you pay in coin. If you have no coin, you may pay with labor. And if you cannot pay at all, you risk losing the land itself. Sometimes you are not even given the choice to remain. The army calls, and as a citizen, you must answer. You cannot say no. You leave your fields behind to serve, knowing that when you return, if you return, your farm may be neglected, your debts may have grown, and your neighbors may speak of how your plot has been taken over by someone else. You have seen this happen to others. A man leaves to fight in far-off lands and comes back to find that he owns nothing but the memories of what was once his. On the days when you remain at home, the work is relentless. You plow with a wooden or iron blade pulled by oxen, feeling every rock in the earth jar through your arms. You scatter seeds by hand, bend to pull weeds before they choke your crop, chase birds away with shouts and thrown clumps of soil. The harvest, when it comes, is no time to rest. You cut grain with a sickle, gather it into sheaths, thresh it on the hard ground, and winnow it in the wind, all before the weather can spoil it. And still, Your obligations do not end with your own fields. Perhaps your landlord expects rent in the form of grain or labor. Perhaps your patron demands assistance with his projects, repairing a wall, hauling stones, working a vineyard during his busy season. You may be called to help build or repair a road, maintain an aqueduct, or supply the local garrison. These are not favors, they are duties woven into the fabric of your life. You live in constant negotiation with the earth itself. Drought is a slow thief, robbing your crops day by day. Floods are sudden and merciless, stripping away soil you have tended for years. In such times, you might borrow grain or coin from a wealthier neighbor, knowing that you are placing a chain around your own neck, debt that you may never escape. Yet the land defines you. It is the measure of your worth in the eyes of others, and often in your own. Children are raised to know its rhythms as surely as they know their own heartbeat. From the time they can walk, they are in the fields, scaring birds, gathering firewood, learning to tell the signs of weather from the shape of the clouds. You pass on your skills, just as they were passed to you, because survival depends on it. The year is marked by the turning of seasons and the milestones of the agricultural cycle. Planting is a time of hope, harvest a time of relief, winter a time of rationing and endurance. Festivals break the routine, days when you can step away from the plow, share food with neighbors, and give thanks to the gods for the mercy of the harvest. These moments are rare, but they remind you that life is more than labor. Still, you never forget that your place in this world is fragile. The same empire that demands your service, your taxes, and your loyalty will not hesitate to strip away your livelihood if you falter. And beyond the horizon, change is coming. The small farms that feed Rome are beginning to vanish, swallowed up by vast estates owned by the powerful. The land, once the heart of your life, may not always be yours. That threat hangs in the air, as real as the smell of the soil on your hands. And in the distance, you can already see the shadows of those great estates creeping towards your fields. You notice the change slowly at first. A neighbor sells his farm to a wealthy man from the city, someone who owns no plow, carries no calluses, but speaks of investments and yields as if the land were just another coin to flip in the air. The man does not move in. Instead, overseers arrive, bringing slaves to work the fields. You watch them plow straight lines across what used to be your neighbor's irregular furrows, the labor quick and efficient, the workers silent under the eyes of the foreman. You tell yourself it is just one farm, just one family moving on. But the next year, another smallholder leaves, then another. Soon the edges of your village begin to change. The patchwork of small fields merges into great rectangles, all part of what people are beginning to call the latifundia. The latifundia are like nothing you have ever seen before. They are sprawling estates, larger than some towns, owned by senators, generals, or merchants who have grown rich from trade. These estates are not farms in the way you know them. They are businesses, agricultural machines designed to feed the appetites of cities and armies on a scale no peasant could match. They grow cash crops, wine for the taverns of Rome, olive oil for the markets of Carthage, grain to fill the storehouses of the capital. The owners are rarely present. They live in villas far away, sometimes in Rome itself, enjoying marble courtyards and private baths while their stewards manage the work. On the ground, you see only the overseers, the rows of laborers, and the wagons that carry away the harvest. For a while, you think you can compete. Your land is smaller, but you work it with care. You know the soil, the weather, the exact moment to plant for the best chance of rain. But the market is not a fair fight. The latifundia can sell grain at lower prices because they have more to spare. They can store surpluses in vast granaries, waiting for shortages to drive prices up. You cannot. Every season is a gamble you must win just to survive. And then there are the debts. Perhaps you borrow seed after a poor harvest, promising to repay in grain when the next one comes in. Perhaps you take a loan to replace a broken plow or buy an ox after yours collapses from exhaustion. The lender is patient at first, but patience runs out. If you cannot repay, the land becomes the lender's property. Some families sell willingly, hoping to escape the endless grind. Others are forced out. When the latifundia take over, the old owners often remain, not as farmers, but as tenants or laborers. You have seen proud men become sharecroppers on the very fields they once owned. The estate provides tools and seed, but demands a share of the harvest so large that little is left for the worker's own family. It is work without pride, labor without ownership. The social order shifts. Where once the village elders were landholders, now they are estate managers, answering to masters far away. Decisions about planting, harvest, and trade are made in cities you may never see. The countryside begins to feel less like a home and more like a colony, an outpost feeding a distant power. Yet there is a strange contradiction. For all their power, the great estates do not erase the peasant entirely. Some land remains in small hands. You might find yourself selling produce to estate kitchens, repairing tools for their workers, or trading goods in the same market stalls you always have. Archaeologists, though you don't know the word, will someday find evidence that peasants still grew their own food, still raised their own animals, still traded and bartered in ways that slipped beneath the notice of the powerful. Still, the trend is clear. The land is gathering into fewer hands. The independence of the small farmer is fading. You realize that you are living in a time of quiet conquest, where the enemy is not an army with swords, but a system of wealth and ownership that swallows the countryside piece by piece. And you cannot help but wonder, when the next poor harvest comes, will your land be next? You wake to the sound of dripping water. It has rained during the night, and now thin rivulets work their way down through the cracks in your roof. You shift on the straw mat, feeling the damp seep into your blanket. There is no point in trying to go back to sleep. The day has begun, and your life does not pause for comfort. The walls around you are mud brick, patched in places where the weather has bitten away at the surface. In the countryside, your home is a single room with a small hearth for cooking, a table rough-hewn from local wood, and a few stools. The smell of smoke hangs in the air, mingling with the earthy scent of wet clay. If you are in the city, it is worse. There you live in the upper floor of an insula, a multi-story block crammed with people. The stairs creak underfoot, the walls are thin, and the sound of your neighbors' arguments or coughing is your constant companion. In the countryside, the fields are never far away. In the city, the fields are gone, replaced by narrow streets and the occasional open market square. But in both places, space is something you do not have in abundance. You share your home with your family, your parents if they are still living, your spouse, your children, sometimes even a cousin or two. Privacy is a luxury reserved for the wealthy. There is no running water. In the village you walk to the nearest well each morning, filling a clay jar and carrying it home. In the city you may find a public fountain fed by the aqueducts, where you jostle with others to fill your bucket before the flow is cut off for the day. The water is precious, and you guard it. Washing is rare. Bathing once a week is a blessing if you can manage it. You scrub yourself with a rag, wiping away the sweat and dust, but the smell of labor is never fully gone. Sanitation is a constant problem. In the countryside, waste is buried or fed to pigs. In the city, it is thrown into pits, or worse, into the street. Flies swarm in summer, rats scurry in the dark, and the stench is sometimes enough to make your stomach turn. Illness is common. Fevers, stomach sickness, coughs that linger for months. You have seen children grow thin and weak from ailments no healer can cure. You pray to the household gods for protection, because when sickness comes, there is little else to be done. The work never ends. If you live outside the city, you tend the fields from dawn to dusk, planting, weeding, harvesting, repairing tools, tending animals. In the city, the tasks are different, but no less exhausting. You might labor as a porter, carrying goods for merchants. You might weave cloth, bake bread, mend shoes, or work in a workshop, shaping clay into pots. The pay is meager, and there are always more hands than jobs. You learn early that every item you own must be made to last. Clothing is patched until the fabric is more repair than original cloth. Shoes are resoled again and again. Tools are sharpened and rehandled until they can no longer be salvaged. Nothing is wasted, not a scrap of cloth, not a bone from last night's meal. Bones become tools or soup stock. Cloth becomes rags. Even ashes from the fire are saved to mix with lye to cleaning. Festivals are your respite. On certain days the entire community gathers. In the countryside you roast meat, drink watered wine, and sing songs around a shared fire. In the city, the games in the arena draw crowds, and for a brief time you forget the press of work and the weight of survival. But even on those days you are aware of the divide between you and the wealthy. You sit far from the best seats. You eat the simplest fare. You watch them arrive in fine tunics, while you wear the same garment you have worn all week. At night you return home tired, your muscles aching, your hands rough and cracked. You lie down on your straw mat, hearing the wind against the walls, and you think of the day ahead. You know it will be the same as this one. Rise, work, endure. And yet you also know you will rise, because to live in this world you have no other choice. Still, you sometimes allow yourself to dream, not of riches or power, but of a year without hunger, a roof that does not leak, and the comfort of knowing your children will inherit more than just your debts. You begin the day with hunger, not the sharp pang of starvation, but the quiet, familiar emptiness that reminds you it is time to eat. Your first meal is simple, the same as it was yesterday and the day before. A coarse bread made from barley or wheat, torn into pieces and dipped into a bowl of watered wine. The bread is heavy and filling, not soft like the loaves sold in the bakeries of the wealthy. It is made from grain you have grown or bought from the market, ground by hand on a stone mill until your arms ache from the effort. You eat slowly, not because you wish to savor the taste, but because you know there will not be much more until midday. If you are lucky, there may be a handful of olives, their briny tang cutting through the bread's dryness. Perhaps there is a wedge of cheese made weeks ago from goat's milk, its flavor sharp and earthy. But more often there is nothing to accompany the bread at all. Your diet is built on what is cheapest and most abundant: grains, legumes, and vegetables that can grow in modest soil. Lentils and chickpeas simmer in clay pots, flavored with onions, leeks, and garlic. Cabbage, turnips, and leafy greens appear when the season allows. Meat is rare. On special occasions, a festival, a wedding feast, you might taste pork or a piece of chicken roasted over coals. Fish is more common if you live near the coast or a river, but even then it is usually salted or dried, not fresh. Wine is part of daily life, but not the rich, unwatered kind the wealthy enjoy. Yours is always mixed with water, sometimes flavored with herbs to mask its sourness. It is safer to drink than much of the water in the city, and it offers a small comfort at the end of a long day. You have heard of banquets where senators recline on couches while slaves bring endless platters of roasted meats, honeyed pastries, and exotic fruits from far-off lands. Such abundance is not just foreign to you. It feels like another world entirely. Your food is for survival, not indulgence. You measure it carefully because waste is a sin you cannot afford. Every crust, every scrap has a purpose. Leftover bread is softened with milk or broth. Vegetable tops feed animals. Bones become stock for soup, boiled until the marrow leaches into the water. There are years when even these modest meals are hard to come by. A poor harvest can push grain prices beyond your reach. Drought or flood in distant provinces can empty the markets and turn bread into a luxury. In the city, riots have been sparked by empty grain stores, desperate crowds shouting for the state to intervene, and sometimes it does. The cura annonay, the grain dole, is a lifeline for many in Rome. Citizens can receive a monthly allotment of grain, enough to keep a family from starving. You have stood in those lines, the air thick with the smell of hundreds waiting their turn, the murmur of voices carrying tales of shortages and rumors of ships still days away. When the supply arrives, there is relief, but also a reminder that you are dependent on forces far beyond your control. In some places, especially in the provinces, there is the Alimenta, a program meant to provide for children. It is not universal, and it does not solve hunger entirely, but it can mean the difference between life and death in a lean season. Still, these gestures from the state are not charity. They are investments in stability. A hungry population is restless. A fed population works, serves, and obeys. If you live in the countryside, you rely less on the state and more on your own stores. After harvest, you set aside sacks of grain in a dry corner of your home, guarding them against pests and moisture. You dry beans, pickle vegetables, and preserve meat if you're fortunate enough to have any. You ration carefully, knowing that what you eat in winter will not be replaced until the next harvest. Feasting, when it comes, feels like a dream. The taste of roast pork, the sweetness of honey, the warmth of a thick stew shared with neighbors. These moments are rare enough to become memories you carry for years. They are the stories you tell your children, the proof that there can be joy in the midst of labor. But more often, the memory you carry is the one you know best, the quiet meal at the end of a long day, sitting on a low stool, the firelight flickering on the walls, the smell of garlic and oil rising from the pot. You tear a piece of bread, dip it into the stew, and take a slow bite. It is not a banquet, but it is enough to keep you alive. And tomorrow you will rise and do it all again.
You have heard the way people in the city speak of you and those like you. To them, the countryside is a place of ignorance and hardship, a world where life is nothing but endless labor. They imagine you as bent-backed, barefoot and silent, someone who lives only to feed others, with no joys or ambitions of your own. But you know better. You know that while your life is shaped by the demands of the land, it is not empty of meaning. Yes, the work is constant, and yes, the risks are many, but there are also moments of warmth, connection, and pride, things that those who mock you will never understand. You are part of something larger than yourself. Every field you tend, every loaf you bake, every jug of oil you press is part of the heartbeat of the empire. Without you, the marble cities would starve, the legions would march on empty stomachs, and the markets would stand barren. Your days are marked not only by toil, but by the rhythm of traditions older than Rome itself. Each season brings its own festivals, rites, and gatherings. In the spring, there is the blessing of the fields, when neighbors gather to thank the gods for the promise of growth. In the summer, you celebrate the first fruits, sharing figs and grapes beneath the warm evening sky. Autumn brings the harvest feast, a day of music, dancing, and stories told around the fire until the stars fade into dawn. Even in winter, when the fields lie silent under frost, there are gatherings for Saturnalia, when roles are reversed and laughter fills the air. You know your neighbors well, every family, every elder, every child who runs through the dusty lanes. When someone's roof collapses in a storm, the village comes together to rebuild it. When a family falls on hard times, others bring what they can spare: a jug of oil, a basket of beans, a length of wool. This is survival as much as kindness, for no one knows whose turn will come next to need help. Trade is not always about coin. You might give a sack of grain in return for a pair of sandals from the leather worker. You might exchange a jar of oil for honey from a beekeeper. Skills are shared as freely as goods. Your knowledge of planting dates, someone else's method for repairing a cracked pot, another's secret for keeping pests away from stored grain. And there is pride in your work. You may not write your name in stone, or have poets sing your deeds, but you can see your labor's worth with your own eyes. The field you sowed in early spring now sways with golden heads of grain. The vines you pruned last winter are heavy with grapes. The olive trees, gnarled and ancient, yield their fruit into your waiting baskets. These are victories as real as any won on a battlefield. Still, you are not blind to change. You hear the stories of more small farms being sold, more land claimed by the wealthy, more young people leaving for the city in search of something different. You know the world you grew up in will not remain the same. But you also know that as long as there is land to be worked, there will be people like you to work it. When you think of the future, you picture your children learning the skills you were taught. You picture them knowing the smell of freshly turned soil, the feel of a sickle in their hand, the satisfaction of a full storehouse before winter. You hope they will inherit not just your struggles. You hope they will inherit the resilience, the resourcefulness, and the quiet strength that the countryside has taught you. At night, when the fields are quiet and the air is still, you sometimes look toward the faint glow of the city on the horizon. You know that in those marble halls your life is little more than an afterthought, a line in an account ledger. But here, among the rows of crops and the people who share your days, you are more than that. You are a link in a chain that stretches back generations and will, you hope, stretch forward beyond you. The truth is, your life is not defined solely by hardship. It is defined by endurance. It is defined by the way you shape the land and are shaped by it in return. And though your name may never be remembered in the histories written by the powerful, your work will echo in every loaf of bread, every cup of wine, every soldier's meal. This is not the life they tell stories about in Rome's forums. It is not the life carved into triumphal arches, but it is real, and it is yours. And in its own way, it is the foundation on which the empire stands.
You have heard the way city folk speak about people like you. In their minds, the countryside is nothing but hunger and hardship, a place where every face is gaunt and every life is desperate. They imagine you bent over in the fields from sunrise to sunset, too worn down to laugh, too poor to dream. But you know this picture is only half the truth. Yes, you work hard, harder than most in the city will ever understand. But you also live in a world that is rich in ways their coins cannot measure. Your days are not just about survival. They are tied to rhythms and traditions that have been passed down through generations. Market days are a kind of celebration. You walk the worn path into the village square, carrying baskets of eggs, bundles of herbs, or jugs of oil. The air is alive with the calls of merchants, the smell of baking bread, the bright colors of dyed cloth hanging from stalls. You greet neighbors and strangers alike, exchanging goods and news. Sometimes you sell what you have, other times you trade, grain for honey, olives for cheese, wool for a pot mended by a skilled hand. You might come home with less coin than you hoped, but more often than not, you come home with what you need. These markets are more than places to buy and sell. They are where you hear the first whispers of change, rumors of war in a far province, a new tax being discussed, or the arrival of a merchant ship bringing exotic spices. They are also where friendships are strengthened, promises are made, and disputes are settled over a handshake. Tradition threads its way through your life like the warp and weft of a woven cloth. In spring, you join your neighbors to bless the fields, offering grain and wine to the gods in the hope of a fertile season. In summer, there is the first fruits festival, where you taste the year's earliest harvest under the warm evening light. Autumn brings the great harvest feast, a day of music, dancing, and tables laden with bread, roasted meat, and jugs of wine. Even in the depths of winter, Saturnalia turns the cold season into days of laughter, gift-giving, and reversed roles between master and servant. The work of the year is not yours alone to bear. When a roof collapses after a storm, neighbors gather with wood and tools to rebuild it. When a family falls behind on their planting, others arrive with seed and willing hands. You have done the same for them. It is not charity, it is survival. Everyone knows that one day they might be the one in need. Even your skills are shared. You pass on what you know about planting by the moon's cycle, how to keep pests from stored grain, how to press olives without bruising them. In return, someone teaches you how to repair a cracked pot or mend a fishing net. These exchanges cost nothing but time, and they make the whole community stronger. There is joy here, too, quiet but real. The laughter of children chasing each other between rows of vines, the warmth of a neighbor's hearth after a long day in the fields, the music of a flute at a wedding feast played under the stars. The city may have its luxuries, but you have your own wealth, measured in shared meals, trusted friendships, and a sense of belonging. You know that not every peasant lives as you do. There are those who truly are trapped in grinding poverty, whose land is too poor to yield enough, whose debts grow heavier each season. But it is not the whole story. The land can give more than hardship. It can give a place to belong, a community to rely on, and a sense of purpose that gold alone cannot buy. When you think of your life, you do not see yourself as powerless. You see the strong hands that built your home, the calloused palms that coaxed food from the soil, the voice that joins your neighbors in song during the harvest feast. You see the skills you have mastered, the bonds you have strengthened, and the traditions you will pass on. And you know that no matter how the city speaks of you, the truth is here, in the fields, in the market square, and in the hearts of the people who share this life with you. That truth will endure long after the gossip fades, carried forward in every planted seed, every shared loaf of bread, and every story told by the fire on a winter's night. So ends our walk through the fields and marketplaces of ancient Rome, where the quiet work of ordinary people kept an empire standing. Their lives were marked by labor, yes, but also by resilience, traditions, and moments of joy that even the centuries have not erased. If this glimpse into their world has left you curious, I invite you to stay with us for more journeys into the past. A quick like or subscription helps keep these stories alive, and your suggestions in the comments often guide where we travel next. After all, history is vast, and there are countless doors left to open.